International human rights groups are calling for an investigation into the sexual assaults of 11 Mexican women. The attacks happened a decade ago, and the inquiry would likely take aim at President Enrique Peña Nieto, who was the governor in charge at the time. Well, for more on this, we're joined now by Madeleine Penman. She's a researcher with Amnesty International in Mexico City. Thank you so much, first of all, Madeleine, for joining us in our program. I know you have a busy schedule. First of all, this is an investigation of horrific abuses during a 2006 crackdown where demonstrators took over a central square. Take us back to that time. What happened at the time and how has it come to light now?
Well, we're talking about a police operation that was ordered in a small town about an hour out of Mexico City in 2006. We're talking about thousands of police officers who descended on a small town of people. This town of people were involved in trying to block the construction of a local airport, and with no apparent reason, these police officers carried out an operation and arbitrarily detained dozens of people in this small town. Some of these people were involved in opposing the local airport, but many of them were just people walking on the street. Over 140 people were detained, and over 40 women in this operation were abused, many of them tortured, and many of them put in jail for no reason. 11 of these 40 or so women took their case before the Inter-American Commission on Human Rights. And just last week, that commission has found that the Mexican state is responsible for a number of human rights violations. And this means that the Inter-American Court on Human Rights will rule on this case and could find binding responsibilities against the government and could bring forward a sentence condemning the Mexican government in this regard. Now, the president himself was personally involved in this police operation in the town of Atenco, San Salvador Atenco, and there's evidence to suggest that he was personally involved in ordering these policemen who gathered up dozens of women, put them in vans, piled their bodies on top of each other, and repeatedly sexually abused them. On some of these women, they forced them to carry out oral sex. We're talking about sexual torture, we're talking about grave human rights violations, and we're talking about a trail of responsibilities that very likely leads directly to the president himself. Horrific stories there. The women endured, from what I understand, more than 10 years of threats as well, intimidation, psychological trauma. Is this case an example of the lengths that women have to go to in the pursuit of justice in Mexico? Yes, unfortunately, this case is not an isolated case. We're talking about a country where torture is widespread. Recently, Amnesty International, we launched a report where we found that of 100 women arrested by Mexican police and armed forces, 72 out of 100 endured sexual violence during their arrest. We're talking about each year thousands of torture claims are presented before authorities, and effectively people that denounce and speak out about these issues are often at risk of reprisals or threats, and not to mention the psychological trauma that comes with these issues and little reparation or justice from the state. So the perpetrators and the torturers in Mexico are hardly ever brought to justice. There's hardly ever any charges laid or sentences for these crimes.
Madeleine, thank you so much for your time once again.